All right, so the immune system fights off disease. In this picture on the screen, you can see that there's a bunch of different things. We can see lymph nodes, spleen, thymus. Those are all organs. We don't need to know those a ton. The T cell, macrophage, B cell, the cells at the bottom, those are white blood cells. You may have heard of white blood cells. They are not the red ones. They're called white blood cells, and they're the ones that fight disease. They're still in your blood, but they're not responsible for carrying oxygen like the red blood cells are. All right, so when you get sick, there's something, there are things that before you get sick prevent you from getting sick, okay? Your body has all of these defenses that prevent things from getting in, okay? And they prevent all things from getting in. They're called non-specific defenses. They're barriers that prevent all harmful stuff from getting into your body. On a really basic level, you've got skin. Skin protects you from getting stuff inside, from viruses or bacteria or things that could make you sick from getting inside your body. Now, the important thing is these are called non-specific because they're really general. They're not saying, oh, well, you're a virus, we're not going to let you in, but you're a good bacteria, we're going to let you in. Your skin doesn't get to decide like, oh, this bacteria can go in and this virus can't. It's just going to block everything or most things from getting in. So if we think about some stuff, we're not going to write these down in our notes. These are just examples. What happens when we get dust in our eyes? What do our eyes do? Yeah, we have eyelashes, and what else happens? They water. Those are reactions or defenses to get stuff so that it doesn't get into our body, right? Our eyelashes or our eyes watering, so our tears. What happens if we get some dust in our throat? Yeah, we cough. So the mucus and the little hairs in our throat make us cough, and so then we end up trying to get it out. And what happens if we get dust in our nose?
You sneeze.
Yeah, you sneeze. The little hairs in the mucus in your nose, the little hairs get tickled and you sneeze. And so all of those things are non-specific defenses. So we're going to write down those examples. So our skin helps us. Our mucus, like our snot in our nose. The little hairs in our nose. I didn't write hairs on here, but the little hairs in our nose or our eyelashes. Our sweat, our spit in our mouth has chemicals that kind of helps destroy some of the bacteria. And then our tears help flush stuff out. If you ever got something in your eye and your eyes just start watering like crazy, that's because your eye's trying to get it out. It doesn't matter what it is, your eye is still just trying to get it out. So we also have something called specific defenses. We're going to get into those next. But if we think about it, specific defenses are for when we already have a virus or a bacteria inside of our body and now we need to fight against it. Okay? Why are they called specific? Let me give you an example. When you get sick with COVID, okay, your body builds up a little army of cells to fight off COVID. Okay? Just because I fought off COVID, does that mean that I'm immune to the flu or strep throat? No, because my little army that my body made is specific to that first disease I got. If I got the flu, it's making an army against the flu. So I could still get strep throat later, okay? Because I need a different army to be made against strep throat. So these are called specific defenses, okay? And I'm going to go back for a second. I skipped one more thing on the non-specific defenses. Sorry. One of the other non-specific defenses we have is the inflammatory response. What this means is a fever, essentially. We increase our body temperature and we have a fever. How does that prevent stuff from either getting in or infecting us? Well, when it's already inside, what we can do is our body sends these chemical messengers to increase our body temperature because viruses and bacteria Viruses and bacteria can't reproduce when it's really warm. So when our temperature is too high, they can't reproduce very well. So it's our body's way of preventing them from hurting us even more. And again, they're not specific because they help target everything in our body, all the bacteria and all of our viruses, the good and the bad. All right, so let's move on to specific defenses. So we said if you get sick with COVID, your body's going to build an army, and then that army is only going to be able to fight COVID stuff. When you get strep throat later, we're going to have to make a different army. So these are specific defenses. They're coordinating attacks against specific invaders, specific viruses or bacteria. So when you get a cold, you're making certain cells to attack that cold virus. When you get the flu, you're making different cells to attack that flu virus. When you get COVID, you're making different cells to attack that COVID virus. So each time you get sick, you're having a different army that your body is making. And that's why they're specific. They're specific to whatever you're sick with. All right, so what are some of these cells? What are some of these cells in our army that we make against these viruses and bacteria? Well, we make something called T cells. Sometimes you'll hear them called killer T cells because they kill infected cells. So infected cells, well, where did those infected cells come from? Well, remember we talked about viruses yesterday? We said viruses aren't living because they can't reproduce on their own, all right? So viruses have to go invade a cell and then use that cell's machinery in order to create new viruses. So these cells that have been infected with this virus, they're virus factories. We don't want them to be virus factories, so we want to kill those cells. Even though they're our own cells, they've turned them into virus factories. How do they kill them? Well, you don't have to write this down, but they release chemicals, and the chemicals punch holes in the cell membrane. So up there you can see the cell is infected with a virus. It's being a virus factory. The T cell is going to connect to it and release those little blue dots. Those are the chemicals. And the chemicals are going to punch holes and destroy the cell membrane so that the cell dies. So we have something to help kill infected cells. We also need something that's going to help us kill the actual viruses or bacteria. Antibodies are going to kind of help us do this. I'll tell you what they do in a second. So B cells make antibodies and memory cells. An easy way to remember the difference between B cell and T cell, antibodies has a B in it, antibodies, and antibodies are made by B cells. So you can remember antibodies and B cells go together because they both have the letter B. We'll talk about what these antibodies do in a second. So let's take a look at what these antibodies do. So what the heck are antibodies? So we have a bacteria and a virus, okay? And the antibodies are the blue Y-shaped guys, okay? So when we have a bacteria or virus that enters our body, what happens is the antibodies, the blue Y-shaped guys, are going to stick onto them. They're like little tags, and they mark them as bad. And then some other cells come in and destroy them and gobble them up. There are a lot of different cells in the immune system. We're not going to learn the names of all the different cells because like these purple cells here have a name. We're not going to learn all of them. There are lots of them, okay? The other cool thing that antibodies do is antibodies are going to bind to the outside of the virus. So we can see that there. And normally this virus would be able to bind to this receptor and get into the cell. Well, when our antibodies stick on the outside, now we can't bind to the receptor. Now we can't infect any more cells. So the antibodies stick on there. They prevent the viruses from infecting other cells, and then they act as tags to mark them as bad. All right, my note here is write small. There's another bullet point we need to fit under antibodies that I didn't put in your note packet, so just write the antibody part small. So antibodies prevent viruses and bacteria from infecting cells and mark them as bad so that other cells can help destroy them. Now, these are specific. Remember, these are under specific defenses. So antibodies for COVID aren't going to help you protect you against the flu. And antibodies against the flu aren't going to help protect you against Lyme disease or bronchitis. So each time your body makes new antibodies. Those antibodies last a little bit. So like with COVID, how long are you immune? Anyone remember? A few months. Yeah, that's because some of these antibodies and also these memory cells hang around for that long. Okay. So some of these things stay in your body. That's why it's unusual to hear of somebody like getting COVID 1 week and then like 2 weeks later getting COVID again, because they still have this army built up of all these cells that are helping fight it. All right. I'm going to skip that video. All right. So we also have memory cells. So these B cells can make these memory cells that stay in your body and help you create antibodies later. Because B cells don't live forever, but they can create memory cells that last a long time. And then they're going to be ready the next time you end up getting infected with that same virus. Now, how long do they stay in the body? Well, it depends. So for some infections, they last longer than others. And vaccines can help us create these memory cells. And with vaccines, certain vaccines, like you need to get them every year. And sometimes you need to get them every 5 years. It depends on how long these B cells stay in the body. The other thing is that, remember, viruses and bacteria are really good at mutating. So even though we have memory cells, the virus and bacteria might mutate, and it might be just enough different that the memory cells don't work anymore. And that's why we have to get, that's why there's different strains, and sometimes we have to get a different vaccine, like for the flu every year. All right, last thing you're filling in on your notes is that memory B cells and antibodies can provide protection for months or years after infection. So in this little graph, the purple is the virus. So notice the virus goes back down to 0 because your body fought it off, okay? But our antibodies, the light blue, they're still staying there. The memory cells, the teal, they're still hanging on. And how long they last kind of